Hi, this is Caroline Chang, and I am the host of Awake to Oneness Radio. For the last year or two, I've been doing a new series called Truth and Freedom. Can we please have a conversation? And the purpose of this new series is basically the leaders in the truth and freedom movement. I try to bring them together if there are disagreements. So I try to bring them together to have a conversation because it's unity within the movement is so important. So the title of the show is Unity Within Diversity. And my guest today is the amazing filmmaker, Mikki Willis. Welcome, Mikki, to Awake to Oneness Radio, Truth and Freedom. Can we please have a conversation?
Awesome to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. I was so glad to meet you in person in Vegas a few weeks ago, and you're really tall. And I'm really, and you can say back to me, you can say, Caroline.
You might be vertically challenged.
Yeah. Very true. So I first saw you. It was in the spring of 2020 on Facebook. It had to be, okay, so the film was released on May the 4th. So it was shortly after that. It was like that same week, like a day or two after the release of the film. And when I saw you, I found you on Facebook, you were in tears. That is my first. I was like, well, I had not seen the film yet, but came across your video and you were in tears of what you were going through at that time. So for those who don't know who you are, which I don't know how anybody can't know who you are, can you please tell us about that experience of, you can start before May 4th, but around that time while you were on making a video in tears.
Sure, it was a long process, really. Born and raised in California, so that kind of puts you on one side of the political aisle. I was born into left ideologies and was a far left progressive for many years, and woke up while I was on the road documenting Bernie Sanders' campaign in 2016. Decided to just tell the truth because I realized that all of politics was corrupt. And I no longer wanted to identify with a certain tribe. I wanted to be on Team Humanity, and I wanted to support truth, the end. And as a result of that, I ended up supporting, there was an incident that's now known as the Covington students incident that happened several years ago, where the headline said that a group of Kentucky young men, they were all about 15 years old, surrounded the first Native Indigenous Peoples March and started chanting, "Build the wall." And I thought, what a horrible thing for these young men to do. And set out to make a video to expose them and to expose that level of racism. And took us about a half a day to realize it was all a lie, a media spin, and that the boys were totally set up, and they were incredibly polite, well-behaved young men from a Catholic high school who just so happened to have been in DC from Kentucky to be part of the Right for Life March. And then this whole thing was, they had bought red MAGA hats at the march because they needed, in the same way when you go to Disneyland, there'll be a whole group wearing yellow shirts so we can identify our group. Vendors selling red hats, and they were losing each other, and the hats were $5, so they all bought a red hat so they could find each other.
Okay.
And I'm sure some of them knew what that hat represented, and a lot of them didn't. It was just, here's a hat, put it on, now we can find each other. But that hat caused all the trouble.
I see.
So we have all these adults who surrounded these kids and provoked them and tried their best, calling them racial slurs, everything you can imagine. And then the media spun the headline, and these kids were the instigators of this situation. And I believed it when I first saw it. And then when I learned that these kids were totally set up, they never surrounded them, never chanted "Build the wall." The adults surrounded them and taunted them and were trying to provoke them into some kind of violence so they could use that against Donald Trump, is what it ultimately was. I decided, let's, as a father of two young boys, it's time to just tell the truth. And so while I thought we were going to make a video to I guess you say in a sense, shame these young men, now
Mm-hmm.
we're going to support these young men. And when I did that, it was the first time I received death threats,
Oh.
and the left turned on me so
Mm,
fiercely. How dare I tell the truth when the truth is in Donald Trump's favor? That's really what it came down to. That we don't want truth. We just want you to support the narrative, be a good little journalist, and only follow our narrative. And the moment you step out of it, now we're going to kill you. It's like,
mm,
wow. So that was a big wake up to me.
mm-hmm.
And then, but it's also divine, because
Yes.
those experiences brought me into realizing that I have a choice to make.
Mm-hmm.
I'm at the crossroads of my life, particularly professionally, and I have a choice to make: either shrink and contract and play the game and be something unnatural other than who I am, or just be bold and just stand for what's right in the world and stand for humanity, regardless of what side of the political aisle it falls on.
Right.
And without that decision, I chose that. And without that decision, I don't think I would have made Plandemic.
Mm-hmm.
The video that you saw was me um, dealing with suddenly being, I had no idea Plandemic was going to become the most seen independent film in history, and with over 1 billion views. You put something out, there's no way you can predict that.
Right.
But we just happened to hit that zeitgeist in a moment when the whole world was looking for the answer that we were providing,
Mm-hmm.
and they happened to have been locked down in their homes. So we had literally a captive audience.
Exactly. That's
And the model I created was, this is your movie, share it. There's no hoops that you have to jump through. You don't have to pay for it. It's free. It's yours. And that allowed the people that were sitting there wanting to do something, but didn't know where to start. It allowed them to actually feel um, a little purpose in sharing this movie around the world, so they could at least help others realize what the film helped them realize, which is they're not crazy. They actually were onto something. There was something really foul at play.
mm-hmm.
But after that came out, it was a lot to deal with. Suddenly, when you, it's hard to understand because very few people will ever experience this. But from going from, I was known in my small communities,
Right.
but from going from an unknown citizen of the United States to suddenly being on the cover of every publication, and it's not positive,
Right.
it's slanderous.
Right.
Having my wife, my children, everyone slandered,
Right.
having the media paint a picture of me as an evil, grifting person who's willing to capitalize on a pandemic and kill old people. It was a lot. It was a lot to deal
Yes.
with overnight, to
Mm-hmm.
just suddenly take that all in and think, oh, wow, like this is, I've been in the media for a long time, so I know how wicked they are, but
Right.
not until you're at the wrong end of their loaded gun do
Yes.
you really feel the wrath of their wickedness.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was me really dealing with that, and also kind of adjusting to the realization that our country was at war, and that the future for my children was uncertain.
Right.
There's a lot to deal with all at once in that moment, to realize, like, I knew things were bad, but I had no idea to the degree that these evil forces have infiltrated every part of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And
So
so that's
true.
what that was about. It was just really purging out and just being honest with the people. Like, I'm human and I'm going through a lot right now. And thank God I did, because
Yes.
I'm a different person than I was in 2020.
Wow. Wow. So amazing. So I'm so glad you did fill in the backstory, because all I knew was from the pandemic portion of it. And I had not, when I saw that clip of you in tears, I had not even seen the film yet. But
Mhm.
okay, I'm glad you started with politics, which I'm glad, because the one thing I am not and never have been is political. Now, I do remember back during that time, I guess, 2016, a guest of mine, because I launched my podcast in 2015. Um, again, not political at all, but a guest of mine had suggested that I check out Bernie. I never heard of Bernie Sanders. I'm not political. But I listened to so I looked on YouTube and I listened to a very short clip of Bernie, and he said, for me, the magic word, unity. I was like, oh, okay. Maybe he's someone I can get behind because I've never had a political bone in my body. I remember when I turned 18, I forget who was running back then, but my father, it was um, a presidential election year. My father trying to, force me to vote, and I never registered, never voted. And people love to say, especially people of my skin tone, love to say, "Well, your ancestors died for you to have the right to vote." And my response was always, and they died for me to have the right not to vote. If
There you go.
I'm serious, I don't.
Died for my freedom to choose.
Yes, I don't buy into this. Well, choose the least of the evil. There's two evils. Choose the one that's least evil. I
Yeah.
don't. I don't buy into that. And for me, I was born coming out seeing BS in government. I was born that way, and I was like, I'm not having any parts of it. And I'm just so glad that was just in me.
Mhm.
In It was just I never had an interest to vote. But in 2016, I wrote in Bernie, and I was like,
Mhm.
oh, maybe, maybe we can have the first writing candidate. Because and like I said, I saw like 5 minutes of Bernie, and he said unity. I'm like, okay, I can get behind that. Because that was what resonated with me, us coming together as one, because I know that we are one family. It doesn't matter your skin color, doesn't matter your politics, doesn't matter your religion, doesn't matter anything. And that awakening, that spiritual awakening, came to me in '07. And it was science, it was quantum physics that woke me up. But my awakening to what is really going on in the world started in 2001. But that was again spiritual, because I had no clue. Right after 9/11, my higher self pretty much yelled at me from within, turn off that news and don't ever turn it back on again. I was clueless. I even said aloud to my higher self, why? Didn't get an answer, but I was obedient. I've always had a strong connection to inner guidance. Everybody does, but most people ignore it. I never ignored it. I always paid. That's why I said I was born with a BS detector. Okay. And so that's why I never got involved with politics. But my higher self told me, turn it off, never turn it back on, right after 9/11. And I was obedient, have not watched not 1 second of mainstream news since 9/11. And then 11 years later, on the anniversary of 9/11, my higher self said, now go on YouTube and see what actually happened that day. That was before I think YouTube was owned by Google. But I
Mm.
was able to find 3 documentaries, and I saw with my own eyes. One was families for 9/11 truth, architects and engineers for 9/11 truth, and building 7, the smoking gun. There's like 50% of Americans don't know that 3 buildings went down in New York City on 9/11. But I saw with my own eyes every word that we were told about 9/11 was a lie, every single word. And I also realized in '07, when I had my spiritual awakening, that it's all about vibration. Everything is energy. And the thing that the news wants to deliberately do is put you in a state of fear with lies. So they're not even putting you in a state of fear with truth. It was all lies. So that was my awakening to what's going on in the world was 2012, and my spiritual awakening was '07. And now I've like married them, where we need to be awake spiritually to who we are as one family, and we need to be awake to what is actually, like you said, in journalism. It's owned by big pharma, just like the government is owned by big pharma, which is the globalists, whatever name people want to call them. They have lots of different names, but
Caroline, do you know my 9/11 connection?
tell me, please.
You don't know this story at all?
No, I don't think so. I may have. Well, I
Okay.
did see your movie, but I can't remember.
No, it's not in any of my, it's in old movies that I told my story in older documentaries.
Okay.
So I was there at the World Trade Center when it
You
was
are.
attacked. I was in the World Trade Center the day before,
Oh,
and sleeping on a friend's sofa, not far. I was in Midtown when the buildings were attacked,
okay.
and he was in the media, and we used his media badges to get into the scene
Mm-hmm.
while they were pushing everyone away from the scene. And I stayed there for 3 days and did search and rescue and ultimately body recovery,
Okay.
and had a profound awakening that the short story is, it was about 50 hours into the experience, someone came around and recommended, I think they were speaking on a bullhorn if I remember correctly, and that they said, for those of you first responders who have been here since the beginning, if you have not slept, please go take a nap. You'll become dangerous to everyone around you if you don't get some sleep. And so we hadn't slept. I was there with a buddy. He was kind of doing his own thing, so I didn't see much of him while I was there because I was right out on, literally right on that platform that they made a postage stamp out of with putting the flag up, that
Mm-hmm.
famous image. I was right up on that platform
Okay.
with one of the men that is in that, actually in that historic photo, who's a fire captain.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went to an abandoned apartment building, and the windows had been blown out, and it was all dusty in the lobby, and there was a couch, and I kind of, beat the dust off the pillows, and laid down on the couch, and pressed my face to the back of the couch, because there's a lot of noise happening out there. I was just trying to find as much solitude as I could, and uh, and I fell asleep instantly. I was exhausted,
Mm-hmm.
and I had a lucid dream of the first victim that we had found, a small man in a business suit that we had found crushed under a fire truck. He had hid under the fire truck when debris was falling before the building had fell, and then the building fell upon the truck and then crushed him under the truck. And I had a lucid experience where this little man was kneeling behind me and breathing on the back of my neck. And I mean, he was very disfigured.
Mm-hmm.
It was, I don't need to go into detail, but he was in bad shape. And I could feel his hot breath on the back of my neck, and it felt like I was wide awake and experiencing this. I later realized it was a lucid dream, and I was terrified in that moment, just chills throughout my whole body. And I finally summoned the courage to spin around to face him,
Mm-hmm.
and of course there was nothing there. And I sat up on the couch and I rubbed my eyes, and then this voice, uh, you've referred to it as my higher self, I refer to it now these days as God, spoke to me and said, "This could be your Vietnam, or," and it stopped.
Mm.
And I was waiting. I'm like, "Or what?
Yeah.
Please finish that statement. Or what?"
Mm-hmm.
And I was too riled up, and I said, "I can't sleep. I'm gonna have to go back out there and just continue working." And I put my jacket and stuff back on. I went out there, and in the time that I'd been out trying to sleep, they had erected these, it was nighttime, these
Mm-hmm.
giant football stadium size lights with generators at the base of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a cinematographer, as we spoke about before we got on this podcast. I love lighting. I love texture of lighting. And so I walked around the corner, and suddenly this dark and gloomy area was lit up really bright, and it was beautiful. The lighting was beautiful. Everything was sparkling, even though it was like, what was sparkling was tragedy,
Right. Right. Right.
but the tragedy was sparkling. And so I just kind of, um, without even realizing it, involuntarily, I said, "Wow, so beautiful." And then I suddenly stopped, and I thought, what did I just say?
Mm.
And I felt this
You caught
immense
yourself. Yeah.
shame, like, how in the world can you call this beautiful? There are women walking around here with photos of their husbands. That just broke my heart, saying, "Have you seen him?" I know he's alive and he was on the, 30th floor, and please, tell me if you've seen him. And I thought, how can I call this beautiful?
Right.
And I stood there for a moment and I said, is there beauty here? And I looked around and it's like 2,000 men and women pulling body bags out of elevator shafts. And I thought, wow, yesterday they came around, they told us the quality of the air we are breathing. They said
Yeah.
it's going to kill you. It's
Mm-hmm.
that bad. The levels are off the chart.
Mm-hmm.
But nobody left. And no
Mm-hmm.
one left even knowing that the chances of finding a survivor at that point, 40 some hours in, was not
It was
likely.
recovery, not
But
survival.
all these humans
Mm-hmm.
were there. And then I had this experience where we actually saved a rescue dog from cardiac arrest.
Mm.
We literally grabbed, oxygen tanks and all these men and women standing around this dog and just praying and trying to get this oxygen mask over a dog's face, which
Right,
was
right,
not,
right. No.
and
Mm-hmm.
then watching this dog go from, convulsions to settling to coming back to life. And the dog, when it came back to life, I was saying to myself, yeah, there we go, buddy. There you go. Good job. Good job, guy. Let all these people save something, please. It's so important that we get to save something. And the dog looked straight at me and went, it
Mm-hmm.
winked.
That's
And
cute.
I remember just looking around like, did anyone else just see that? Wow. Looked straight in my eyes of all the people around me and winked.
Mm-hmm.
And so I remembered all of that. And I stood there and as I was saying, is there beauty here?
Mm-hmm.
And I started to see the beauty.
Mm-hmm.
I saw all these people and I thought, they're selflessly, I don't know that I've ever experienced this before. I come
Mm-hmm.
from Hollywood. There's so much selfishness in Hollywood. And here are these people knowingly breathing asbestos and everything else that's going into the lungs that we were all informed that will cause health issues. And no one left. And here we are. This is this. And I sort of said to myself, as I start crying, I said, this is who we are. I'll
Mm-hmm.
never forget this. This is who we really are.
Wow.
What that meant to me is when something happens that's so much grander than all of the false icons and idols and fetishes and materialistic goals and all the stuff that we've been wired to think is important.
Right.
When something happens that's so much more important than all of that stuff, that natural human emerges. And that natural human is good.
Mm.
That natural human is loving and compassionate, and it doesn't care what skin color you are. It doesn't care what gender you are. It doesn't care if you're left or right or all that crap that we make up. It's just life supporting life.
Wow.
And that changed me forever.
Mm.
I immediately, I was quarantined in New York for 2 weeks. When I finally got to go home, I began a divorce process. I was
Mm.
married at the time
Mm-hmm.
to someone
Mm-hmm.
that it just wasn't working. Beautiful
Mm-hmm.
person.
Mm-hmm.
But I said, everything in my life that's not real, I went out of Hollywood. I had nothing to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
I left Hollywood and I left my marriage. I put everything I had. I gave her just about everything. What I had left over, I put in storage.
Mm-hmm.
Went to live on a friend's vineyard in the Napa Valley, and just kind of had to reinvent myself because I realized that I was part of something that, through incremental steps, had begun to change me as a man.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what it's designed to do.
Right.
But I could no longer claim being my mother's son
Mm.
because I wasn't who I used to be, and not
Right.
Hollywood had changed me.
Right.
And the rest of my life would be getting back to who and
Mm.
what I was meant to be and to do the work that I came here to do. And so
Wow.
that was the catalyst for the work that I'm doing today.
Wow. That's so beautiful. I did not know that story. It's interesting you said you, because again, we as humans with these labels, you said you used the word God and I used higher self. God is all that is. There is no separation. That I learned, and again, it was science taught me that everything is energy. My name for that energy, it's one energy, is love. The
That's right.
essence of who we are is and I have to use the word unconditional love, because humans like to put conditions on love. We are all God in a drop. My favorite quote is, You're not a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in a drop.
Yeah.
Each one of us is all of God, not a piece of God. We are all of God in a drop. This has been proven scientifically, but before science discovered it over 100 years ago, it's been taught from ancient wisdom and from spirituality for eons. This is an undeniable truth of who we are. We are all the essence of the the holographic essence of God.
I was just going to mention the holographic.
Yes.
Very few people understand what
Yes.
that means, that
Yes.
all of the information is contained within every fragment of the whole.
Every cell.
And so many people, I am now surrounded by some of the most amazing people that I've ever had the honor and privilege to work with.
Mm-hmm.
And the majority of them are Christians.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I was raised without religion and actually witnessed an uncle and aunt who became born again Christians. And they tried really hard to convert everyone in the family, which I understand why, and now I understand it. I was very young at the time. My family needed it. And so they were doing their best to save my family. But all I saw was a result of that was they were exiled from the family.
Mm-hmm.
And so at a very young age, I connected that with, oh, Christianity, bad. Don't do that. That's how you lose family.
I
And
hear
so it
you.
took me many years. I had a spontaneous Christ awakening in 2008 that really, literally came out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
While my wife and I were sitting in a Mexican restaurant, and something started to happen to me, and I was completely sober. I usually have a margarita with my Mexican meal, but not this time. I was completely sober, and I said, "We have to leave right now. Something's happening." And I ended up having this Christ awakening, and it
Mm-hmm.
was ultimately, you talk about frequency, super important.
Yes.
All these conversations are important because what it did was it opened me up to what I now call the father frequency.
Mm-hmm.
It was my having been raised by a single mother, without a father. There was a disconnection I had from father,
Mm-hmm.
and so it was realigning with the father frequency so that I could be a complete and whole man before I had children, so I could be a father myself
Wow.
and not repeat the same behaviors
Right.
that were very common within my lineage of my
Right.
family. That it was time to break the mold and to recreate the trajectory of my lineage. And so that Christ awakening was huge for me. It was massive, but I still wasn't really open to Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
And since I've been working with all these wonderful Christians, it's really opened my eyes to the power of it's really to the power of that faith. And it's what I used to identify more. I've been all over the map when it comes to religious ideologies, and I always more identified as a Buddhist or a Taoist.
Mm-hmm.
But today I more identify with Christianity. I now understand the full impact and value of it. But I'm also fully aware of the dogmas and the traps and the part of it that is taken too far, such that I have mentioned in many podcasts, I've started to talk about quantum physics
Mm-hmm.
and the nature of the holographic nature of the universe and
Yes.
frequency, and then you read the comments on Christian channels and like, oh, a bunch of woo-woo garbage. This is
It's not food
darkness trying to. And I say to those people, I
at
say,
all.
if you really have faith in your God, um, you would understand that in understanding the holographic nature, you would understand that God created all of this. And there's I've been um, mildly shamed before for coming off stage and speaking in front of 4,000 people. And I had said, this is a time for people to find God by whatever name you call your God. And I came off stage and was accosted by little gray haired women who were very adamant to make sure that I knew that there's only one name for God. And I said,
That's the problem.
yeah, I said, you might want to expand your belief on that a little bit, because if you really understand Christ and Christ's teachings, that was one of the most
That
inclusive
that's
teachers on the
exactly
planet.
what Christ, that's
And
exactly what Yeshua,
yeah,
then Joseph. Sometimes I hear channels saying he's not crazy about the name Jesus because it has gotten such a bad rep because he taught one thing:
Yeah.
unconditional
And that is love.
love.
And if you look at my
That's
edit bay,
it.
which I'm about 15 feet from right now, there's
Yeah.
one giant word on the wall, and that is LOVE.
I saw that. I saw that
God,
somewhere. Yeah, I
did
did
you?
see
Yeah,
that.
God is,
Is
God is
and I have
love.
to put the word unconditional because human love, they love you one day and they hate you the next day. God is unconditional love. There's nothing anyone can do. The essence of who we are is that love. That is the
I had a
essence.
fallout with a business partner about 6 years ago, and
Hmm.
I told her she's a very, very difficult person, and I told her, I said, I want to be super straight with you. I don't like you,
Okay.
but there's nothing that can stop me from loving you.
That's beautiful.
And you're just gonna have to deal with that. I'm gonna keep
Yeah.
loving you.
Yes.
And that sometimes people have a hard time with that duality of understanding that we don't like each other. Sometimes we're not compatible. And I was not
Hmm.
compatible with this person. And she was not compatible with me.
Right.
Drove me crazy. So I don't like her. I don't want to
Yeah.
spend any time with her,
Right.
but I love her.
Yes.
And I choose to love her and to want the best for her in her life,
Right.
whether we agree or not. And
Right.
this country could use a little bit of that right now,
Oh,
because
that's
it's been so wired
not
that
just
if we
this
don't
country, the
agree,
world. But
yeah,
here's the thing, you said the word, the duality. That's the whole thing, what's happening. The title of your last film, The Great Awakening. What the Great Awakening is, what humanity's Great Awakening is waking up from separation consciousness, thinking that we are separate. That is the biggest problem. All of humanity's problems stem from one thing: thinking that we're separate. We're separate by color, we're separate by religion, we're separate by culture, we're separate by country, we're politics, you name it. We're separate. But when we understand that is what is causing all the problems, and when we wake up to the ultimate truth, we are all one. It's called unity consciousness. And so
right.
what's happening on a collective consciousness level, humanity is gradually awakening from separation consciousness to unity consciousness.
Mhm.
And when we get to unity consciousness, we will be living, and it's going to be happening in our lifetime. I'm older than you are. It's going to happen during our lifetime. This is not something that's going to happen 100, 1,000 years from now. We are in the midst of humanity's great awakening. The other thing that last time my higher self really spoke to me was the March of 2020.
Mhm.
March of 2020, my higher self said, humanity's great awakening has begun. We are 3.5 years into the great awakening, and we're right at the middle point. This awakening that I'm speaking of, we will fully see it by 2026. We will be fully living in this paradigm shift. That was the quote that I got from you, Buckminster Fuller, and I wrote it down.
Mhm.
Buckminster Fuller's quote: in order to change an existing paradigm, you do not struggle to try to change the problematic model. You create and I put the word brand new model, and make the old model obsolete. So that's what we're doing right now. When I
That's
saw that,
exactly what we're doing right now. And I
that
just
is
that noise was just me preparing a video,
okay.
a 6-minute video. Have you seen the short film I did called Our Birthright?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
Okay.
It's up to you. It's your show,
Yeah,
but we might want to
sure.
either watch that or end the show with it. It's 6 minutes long, but I think you're going to really love it.
I know I'm gonna
Um,
love it. Why don't we end the show with it?
okay, that sounds great.
Definitely,
I just sent
definitely.
you the link. It's in your email.
Okay. Well, I can always let you run it from your end too.
Oh,
But
okay. Yeah, we can do that.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
queued up and ready.
All I have
You
to
just
do
give me the
is,
go.
yeah, yeah. But definitely, totally. Oh, for sure, definitely. But yeah. When you were showing what the homeschool co-op in Texas that you guys are was it the lion
The Lion Pride.
the Lion Bride, and I don't even know who Buckminster Fuller is, but I said that quote, that is what, because it's not about lowering our frequency to push against what's not working. It's not, it's about keeping our frequency, because it's only, you have one or two choices: live from love or fear. Those are only two choices. And we have to stay in love, because they can't even touch us in that frequency. Because when I say they, that's just our shadow side. They're not separate from us. When you were talking, when you were describing your experience at 9/11, all I could think of is the yin yang symbol, the light and the dark, which are equal. They're one. But and your first thought was, oh, how beautiful. But then you're like, how could I say that? You were expressing the truth in that moment when you said, oh, how beautiful. Because everything that happens is a soul plan. Nothing happens that was not planned. Everything is happening, even 9/11 is happening in perfect divine timing for humanity's awakening from its dream. So when we understand that this is a dream of our own creation, we don't get so attached to that physicality and that materialism. We understand that it is all, both my children are in spirit. My son transitioned 9, and there is no death. So I don't even, and I'm not saying that. Some people might say, oh, she's just saying that because she doesn't want to feel the pain. No, I know it. I have my son's voice on tape from spirit. I have images of him from spirit. My son transitioned 9 years ago, and I launched my podcast 6 months after his transitioning, because I was awoken in the middle of the night where my higher self just said, just do it. And the just do it was to wake everybody else to the truth of who we are. And that was 9 years ago. And my daughter just transitioned 9 months ago. I kind of hit you up back in December when she first transitioned. But I know it was a soul plan. They're not gone. They're right here with me. My son told me he's the co-host of the podcast. He loves what I'm doing. I came here for a reason. I tried to commit suicide 3 times in my life. The last time I tried to commit suicide was 3 years before my son's transition, when doctors told me he was going to transition. Matter of fact, I wrote a chapter in this book called We Touched Heaven. The title of the chapter I wrote is called My Miracle on 34th Street, because doctors had told me in 2011 my son wasn't going to live, and I tried to kill myself. But I was blessed with a miracle. My son literally pulled himself off life support, and doctors were in amazement, and because his vital signs were perfect. And we went home a week later. When I got home that day, I said to God, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but I promise you, I will never, ever, ever, ever stop thanking you for letting me bring my son home in 2011. And he did transition 3 years later. I was at complete peace. When my daughter transitioned, I was at complete peace, because I knew it was a soul plan. I know everything that happens. 9/11, everything was a soul plan. We signed up. We made these plans in spirit for a purpose, for a higher purpose. And no soul ever is harmed.
So
This is all a dream.
I really appreciate who you are. What you're speaking into is literally the medicine that can cure all suffering in the world. And it is a small but quantum leap for everyone to make. It's kind of like what they said when they stepped off the plane, whether we landed on the moon or not. I don't know. I have a lot of friends really convinced that it didn't happen.
I totally get you.
At this point, everything's possible. But one small step for man and one giant leap for mankind. And that leap, that if people were willing to make it, it will change everything in everyone's life, and it will change the world. And that leap, I call it divinity consciousness, to being aware that everything is divine. Nothing happens to you. It might feel like it happens to you, but everything happens for you. It's cliche. I know it's only cliche, because everything powerful that we've been saying eventually becomes cliche because we hear it too many times. The reason we hear it too many times is because there's something valid in it.
Right.
And so if everything happens for us and not to us, then can we become students of life in such a way that instead of resisting life showing up, that we say, okay, it's here. This is not what I expected. It's not what I wanted, not what I planned for, but it's here. So what is the lesson in this? And that was the lesson that I was left with at the crossroads of my life as I stood on the rubble of the World Trade Center, because it
Mm-hmm.
was either the or. I'm glad we're getting back to this because I
Mm-hmm.
just realized I left that out. This could be your Vietnam, or what did that
Mm-hmm.
mean?
Right.
What I realized that meant was you can utilize this for to be irresponsible for the rest of your life.
Yes.
And I'm saying in a very, very particular language because
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people who have adapted to a victim identity, they receive a payoff from that.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you can say, I'm an addict, or I'm a this, or I'm a that, or I had a really tough life, or, then you can make a mistake and you can do something completely demoralized and say, wow, it's just, I had a hard upbringing, or I just,
Mm-hmm.
I'm still dealing with this addiction, whatever it is. And so there's a
Right.
lot of people that actually choose
To blame.
to put the blame out there. But every time we say it's your fault, we're giving that whoever we're blaming the power over us. The moment we say, no, it's me. I chose this in some way or another. I didn't want it, but if I chose this at a level of consciousness that I can't even really fathom, why might I have chosen this outcome?
Right.
And the moment everything in my life that seemed to be unfortunate, when I made that switch in my life a number of years ago, I suddenly could see that I had no failures in my life. I thought
Mm-hmm.
I did. I had a divorce. I had 2 companies that failed. I had, all these things I planned on doing. I was a motocross racer, got into a pretty bad accident, lost that career. Wait a second here. I was in the music industry. That didn't turn out the way I thought it was going to turn out. But everything that I sampled in
Yeah.
is all part of my life as a filmmaker right now. I understand the music
Yes.
industry. I
Yes.
understand extreme sports. I understand all these things that I didn't think worked out were all boot camp preparation for me to do what I'm doing right now.
I love
And
what you're
until you see
saying.
the perfection
Yes.
of that in your life, you will always have regrets. And regrets breed resentment, and resentment breeds anger, and anger breeds division,
Yes.
sickness, disease,
Mm-hmm.
all of it.
Victim means that it's just I
Yeah.
just did a talk just 2 weeks ago at the IONS conference, which is the
Yeah.
Association of Near-Death Studies.
Mm-hmm.
And the title of my talk was the every challenge in our life is our greatest blessing. Every
Mm-hmm.
challenge we planned to help us, like when you were standing at the World Trade Center, that was a challenge point. We create these challenges, so either we still have a choice in every now moment. Are we going to take the low vibration response to that challenge, or are we going to raise ourselves higher from that challenge? Every single challenge is a blessing, and that what you were saying, the word you used was suffering.
Mm-hmm.
There's a difference between pain and suffering. Pain is ouch, that hurt. Suffering is pushing against that pain, saying, no, I don't want it. I don't want that pain. I don't want it here. Pain's going to happen, but how do you respond to that pain? Are you going to just constantly push that pain away? Or wake up and remember you planned that pain. You planned it for your highest good. Everything that happens to us happens for our highest good. And I love what you just said, because what I'm doing right now, I'm a journalist and a podcaster and all the different hats I wear. Every job I ever had brought me to this point. I'm using everything I've learned in this now moment, and it was all for a purpose, all for a reason. So
That's
it's
right. That's
it's
right. That's
so
exactly right. And in the same way that you've had two deaths in your family that
Transitions.
the cat with
They're,
transitions,
they're right there.
um, um, that were the catalyst for you to be a voice in the world. My brother and mother died a month apart from each other.
Yeah, I
And
remember
so we
that.
look at these things and we can either allow them to bring us down or elevate us
Rise.
in every choice that we make. And I didn't know what to do about that situation for many years. And so I just avoided it. But
Mhm.
now I get to do something about it. It's what allowed me to see in early on in 2020 what was coming. People always say, how did you get a documentary out in May
I
4th
know.
of 2020?
That was so
Like
perfect. That was perfect
before
timing.
anyone knew what was going on. It's like, because I had this experience with Anthony Fauci where he prescribed a medicine that killed my brother. And when
Yes.
I saw that man's face and he was back at the helm of global health, it just, I knew
Yes.
it's about to get bad.
Yes.
And so, but without that experience,
Right.
would I have recognized that? Or, would I have just fallen into the herd and been a sheep and gone along with it, and perhaps even have received the vaccine and had health issues like just about everyone that I'm working with now. I work with a lot of top scientists and they
Hmm.
all got the vaccines.
Really?
Oh
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
Oh yeah, because there's something that we explain this in the Great Awakening.
Okay.
And it's for people to understand that the people who don't get it are not bad people, nor are they dumb people.
Right.
The
No.
programs that are the mind control programs that our government had been working on for generations at this point
Yes.
are designed for, as far as I've been able to tell through my deep research and my ontological studies, which is really my background is ontology, the study of what it is to what makes humans tick, right?
Okay.
And when you understand that level of psychology, to look at it and go, what let's do the research and find out. Let's look into these programs because they're real. I mean, they're
Hmm.
classified programs,
Hmm.
and declassified programs, that
Right.
is. They've been through court hearings and all of that. So there's a lot of literature that you can read to understand what was their goal, what are their
Hmm.
methods, what is the outcome, and how is it how is it still affecting us today? Where is it
Right.
applied? You look at
Right.
all of these different ways to measure this, and I've come to the conclusion that the programs were designed for highly educated people
Hmm.
and deeply compassionate people, caring people.
Okay.
And
Hmm.
so the highly educated people are people who don't know it, but most doctors have been educated through Big
Right.
Pharma.
Yeah.
Big Pharma owns all the
Everything.
brochures and medicine and stuff that is sent to the doctors of some new breakout treatment for the patients, all crafted by Big Pharma. A lot
Hmm.
of the speaking engagements, doctors go and the big ones get $50,000 to speak, and they don't even know
Right.
that who's underwriting that entire show is Big Pharma.
Yes.
And aside from that, they've spent years in federally funded institutions being taught by people with a higher ranking than them. So they've learned to
Mm.
bow to authority. They've learned to go, professor, I pay professor, so professor is right. They
Yeah.
don't question professor. They don't question the authorities that they're paying to teach them.
Right.
And after you're in that system for 8, 12, some of them 16 years,
Yeah, it's very true.
they become indoctrinated and they're
Yes.
highly intelligent people, but that's where the education is their
Right.
weakness. Then
Right.
you have people like myself who got caught up in the whole mix, and
Hmm.
really bought into the Bernie thing
Right.
because of he mentioned his rhetoric was unity and helping people
Yes.
of color and helping women and the people at the bottom and
Yes.
middle class and lower class. And as a kid who was raised on welfare by a single mom, it
Hmm.
reached me. So that
Of
they got
course.
me
Right.
through what I call weaponized compassion.
Yes.
Was if you want to help these people, which who doesn't really,
Right.
then follow this person.
Hmm.
And that's how they get you. They know how to do it. So the people who aren't awake now,
Right.
a lot of these doctors, they're not stupid, they're not bad
Right.
people. They actually care a lot and they're highly educated, which has become a crutch for them because now, in the same way that so many scientists that I've sat down with who,
Hmm.
and quite frankly, it's one of the reasons why it's turned me over to accepting God in my life and bringing it to my family,
Right.
is because I've witnessed the people that I can categorize as well. they're healthy. Their
Right.
mind, their spirit, their heart, their body, their relationships, their family, their wives, their children, they're
Right.
healthy. And I
Right.
look at that and I go, what do these healthy people have in common?
Right.
Interesting. They all have some form of faith in God in their lives. They have this foundation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and now here's a category of really good people fighting the fight,
Mm-hmm.
but I can't say they're healthy. They're physically out of shape, or their mentality is a little bit off. They're kind of paranoid. They're creating turmoil within their own movement. They're
Mm-hmm.
fighting. They're infighting. They're
Mm-hmm.
reactive. They're causing, in some cases, just as much harm as they are good.
Mm-hmm.
But their intention is good.
Right. Right.
What's going on with these people? What is
Right.
going on?
Mm-hmm.
And typically it's these scientists who, because you can't completely quantify this thing we call God
Mm.
with science. Some say you can. To
Okay.
some degree, you can,
Yes.
but there's an ineffable quality of
Mm-hmm.
God that is meant to be ineffable. Our language falls short for the to
Yeah.
describe and understand the sacred. And
Yes.
so we can only create images and caricatures and names and descriptions that come close to describing what it is that we're experiencing, but
Mm-hmm.
language will never be able to articulate what it is. The moment we say it's that is the
Right.
moment we're identifying what it's not.
We're labeling it. When we
Yes.
say
And
is that,
so
we're
scientists
labeling
have a hard time without being
it.
able to look in the microscope and go, that's it. And so they
Mm-hmm.
just go, it doesn't exist if I can't see it.
Well, wait, wait,
If I
wait.
can't explain
I've
it.
got to jump in right now. I got to jump in because I learned in seventh grade. So this was an awakening moment in seventh grade when my seventh grade science teacher told me we do not live in a solid world. And then now when he said that in seventh grade, it stuck with me. That was an awakening moment. And then when I learned about quantum physics and I understand that everything is energy, that energy is interconnected and interdependent, I also learned that with our five human senses, and every time I give a speaking engagement, I show slides and I talk about this, with our human five senses, we can only detect 0.04% of what is actually around us. Science has proven this. We cannot detect. So that means we 99.96, I think I'm doing that math right, percent of what is actually around us, we cannot detect. So if a person says, I only believe in what I can see with my eyes, or even with an instrument, they are negating 99% of what is actually there. If we really would see, we as human beings like to say, oh, we know that we're spiritual beings just having a temporary physical experience, but we don't live it. We don't live that truth. So if we really start living, I am spirit, living this temporary, this body is not going to last. Spirit lasts forever. When we really switch that mindset from body to spirit, and we want the body, spirit, and mind to be in sync, but when you switch that mindset and understand your human body cannot detect all that's around you. If you're married to it, well, if I don't see it, it doesn't exist.
Mhm.
I can't stop you from living that way, but there's a lot you're missing.
Yeah, a lot,
A
a
lot
lot.
you're missing. And the other thing about religion, I personally, I have no religion. I'm very spiritual because I know that we're one, regardless of what a person's religion is.
Mhm.
But one of the things, and when I awoke to the universal truth of oneness from quantum physics, was that religion tends to separate man from God. God is here. God's not up there. God is right in everybody's heart and soul. That is where God is. And whatever name they want to use to call God, hey, is that whatever name you want to use for God? God, my term for God is all that is. There is nothing separate from God, nothing. That what we call evil is God, because there is nothing separate from God. It is frequency. Low frequency or low frequency of fear or high frequency of love. That is our choice. And every now moment, every now moment. But I didn't mean, I just, when you were saying about there are
I
people that
appreciate
say,
it. No, I appreciate it very, very
well,
much. I wish
I,
I had more time with
yes.
you today. I know I do have a heart out, which if we're going to play the video, we need
Oh,
to start that
definitely.
soon because I do need to jump off really soon. I have just a line of meetings and things going on. I've been out of town. I was in Los Angeles all week and I just got back yesterday. So I have
Okay.
a bunch of stuff to catch up on. But before we
Yeah,
end with this video,
sure.
I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge you. I really appreciate, I said earlier, I really appreciate who you are and I appreciate your perspective. It's amazing that you have been through what you've been through and you have alchemized that into gold that you're now spreading with everyone in range. And may the world awaken such that the majority of us understand what you understand, because things will change. People are always asking me, what's the solution though? What do we do? What do we do? And I always say, stop trying to fix the world out there.
Start with you.
Real change happens from the inside out.
Exactly.
And
Very,
so
very
if we
true.
can just spend time on knowing, really knowing thyself, to really understanding all of the little traumas that shade our experience of life, all of our little traumas that we relate to our mates through, all of our little traumas that have us repeating cycles and habits that we pass down to our children. If we could just take responsibility for that at the most subtle and massive levels, to understand our power,
Yes.
that there's no one that's going to come in and fix things, it's going to come in and change things, until we take accountability for what we are, who we are, and why we are, and
Exactly.
step into that with everything that we have, and to trust that this thing that I have learned to call God,
Yes.
this consciousness
Mm-hmm.
that is always there in broadcast, just like every cell frequency that's in the room you're in right now.
Mm-hmm.
You can tune your phone to a little code called a phone number, and you can call up whatever frequency that's already there. It's just in the
Right.
room, and you just have to dial the code to match that frequency to make a connection to that.
Right.
And so there's this infinite intelligence that is always there in the room with you, and that it wants to inform you and work through you
Mm-hmm.
if you just allow it to. But there are humans on the planet that don't want that more than anything. So
Yes.
they will keep you in a conversation that has you forget that that is your true nature, because they want you to follow them.
Yes. They want to keep us in a state of fear, because when we're in a state of fear, we can't hear the higher frequency of all that is God, source, universe. It's at a higher frequency. But when we're
And
in a state of
yes,
fear, we can't hear that.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
correct. And
Yes.
not just fear, but
Right.
also keep us in a momentum of busyness.
Yes.
Even when we're not feeling fear, the momentum of being busy
Right.
is where they want us to, because the distractions that have us, our mind completely occupied at all times of our waking day,
Mm-hmm.
and not having that moment of stillness,
Right.
that is so critical, that we have a moment of stillness in every single day.
Yes.
And some people achieve that through prayer, and I highly
Mm-hmm.
recommend it, because there
Yes.
really truly is incredible power in prayer. Prayer is not asking for what I've learned, it's not asking for what you want, but it's giving thanks to what you have,
I have in
even if you
every
don't,
now
even
moment.
if the presence of that having isn't in front of you right now,
Right.
but you know it's there. And so it's
Right.
giving thanks,
Mm-hmm.
and taking a moment to what happens to me anytime, if I'm just sitting at an airport and I decide to close my eyes, take a moment, focus on my breath. Some people call it meditation. I just call it being still for a moment,
Yes.
and just breathe, watch all that busyness. There's a momentum. It's like the wheel slows down finally. It chugs down until it's like, and then it constantly wants to stray. And I hear a noise, an announcement. I want to go over there. And I was like, no, I get to direct my mind where it goes.
Yes.
And I just choose for the mind to just take a break for it. Just a second. That's all I ask. You go right back to all your busyness in a moment. Take a break. And the moment that momentum slows just enough, it's amazing what happens. I suddenly just have this idea that it's almost like that moment from the Matrix of just like, I know Kung Fu. It's like, boom. Oh, yes, this is the next move in my life. Awesome.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
And an alarming number of people don't take the time to allow that infinite intelligence to speak to them.
Yes.
And we need to get back to that, because that's when we reconnect with
so true.
Who and what and why we are.
So true. I always give this tip that works for me is being out in nature, just quieting my mind, taking in all of nature, even if it's just for a few minutes. But that I do it every day at home, but being out in nature, I make that stronger connection. And in every now moment, I give thanks. Even if it's this bottle of water, spring water, I give thanks. I even, if you can read it, it actually says on there, "Thank you, I love you." I label my water.
Beautiful.
Emoto.
Dr. Emoto, yeah.
Yes, I label my water.
Well, on that note of what you just said, let me just say a minute of this before I hop off here, and that is to understand the science of entrainment is important. So entrainment, there are a lot of studies that have been baffled by the fact that, women's cycles will sync up when they're around each other. There are stores that have old-fashioned grandfather clocks in them that have suddenly found a way to just energetically synchronize. Clocks that are completely out of sync, and after a period of time, under certain conditions, they will sync with each other.
Resonance.
So that the power of entrainment, when you're out in nature, all of nature is emanating a broadcast. And when we're surrounded by these digital jungles that we're all surrounded by right now, there's a broadcast of this digital synthetic realm that it entrains us to. But when we go into nature, all of nature is in communication. And you'll actually see that in the video I'm about to play. Okay. All of nature is constantly in communication. Right. It's why nature works so well. Even when it's destructive, it's purposely destructive. Right. We have toyed with nature, and we now control nature to the point of it being out of balance with itself, because we now make it rain when it shouldn't, or to drive the rain when it should be raining. Right. And we dam up rivers and change the natural flow of nature. But when it is left to itself to do its thing, right, nature is brilliant, beyond comprehension. Nature knows, the trees know when to let go of its leaves. The leaves know what to do when they hit the ground. The insects know what to do when those leaves decompose to a certain point. Right. And down and down and down into the soil. Like, there's creatures that are all there working in unison and creating life in perfect harmony with each other. Right. Even if that harmony is destructive, because part of life is destruction. Yes, it's creation and destruction. It's birth and rebirth cycle. And so when we take that time to entrain with nature, we're realigning with our nature. And when we realign with our nature, then we're less susceptible to the broadcast of the synthetic digital realms, which are not natural to our species. Yes, so true. So true. With that said, how do I share this video? I've been a human rights activist for almost 20 years. As a documentary filmmaker, I've been on the front lines of many of our nation's biggest scandals and protests. From that perspective, I've been an eyewitness to the rise and fall of numerous people-powered movements. Nearly every organized resistance I've been a part of has ended just inches from victory for the same critical mistake: infighting, when members of the same group turn against each other. It often begins with whispers about the most prominent spokespeople of the cause. These rumors typically sound like, "I hear John is controlled opposition," or "some people are saying Jane is compromised." While the use of infiltrators and agitators is a very real thing, I've yet to experience one scenario where such a label was accurately applied. And suspiciously, These labels are always branded on the people who are making the most progress. With the degradation of their reputation goes their contribution to your life. Prior to social media, people actually sat down to dialogue through their differences. Today, without solid evidence or sufficient inquiry, we go directly to our keyboards to vent our suspicions. Even after the rumor is proven false or simply fades away, some level of doubt and division always remains. This is all by design.
Part of what allowed so many people to walk away from Assange was some of the Me Too allegations that had surfaced and that were ultimately discredited, stuck in people's minds.
The voices of propaganda are masterful at this game. They knowingly run a false story, then retract it, knowing the lie will reach millions, but very few will see the correction.
Amy Coney Barrett's religious faith is being called into question again. She belongs to this People of Praise group, which the Southern Poverty Law Center has labeled them a hate group. When I stated that People of Praise had been deemed a hate group, I just got them mixed up with another group. I conflated them.
Ah, okay. That happens, you know, it's easy to do.
In the words of former CIA Director William Casey, we'll know that our disinformation program is complete when everything the American public believes is false. The planting of divisive rumors is one of the most common tactics used in psychological warfare. As the lies bloom, like worker bees, well-intended citizens pollinate the masses with poisonous disinformation. What the gossiping bees fail to realize is that they themselves are doing the work of controlled opposition. They are literally, unwittingly, working on behalf of the very forces they believe they are resisting. Again, all of this is by design. While we've all been distracted by the latest trends and tragedies, everything that has influence on our behavior has been infiltrated by an agenda to control our thoughts. Whether their goal is to make us purchase a product, vote for a political party, or submit to experimental inoculations, there are forces at work who understand the functionalities of your mind far better than you do. Their goal is total control. But because they are the few and we are the many, they can only achieve total control through the age-old tactic of divide and conquer.
You're either with them or with us.
Never before have we been so divided. Divided by politics, religion, nation, state, race, class, gender, and now, vaccine status. To better understand how we got here, consider these three quotes from The Art of War by Sun Tzu. The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. Victorious warriors win first and then go to war. The secret lies in confusing the enemy so that he cannot fathom our real intent. Though Sun Tzu lived over 2,500 years ago, his work remains at the heart of our CIA as well as the Chinese Communist Party's strategy today. It's no coincidence that around the same era as Sun Tzu, the words "united we stand, divided we fall" were first recorded. It is unity that will save our communities.
As you see in the audience, Muslims, Christians, Jewish community, Democrats, Republicans, white, black, everyone all in between. This is the example of what you get when you choose to attack all members of the human family.
Our greatest power is our numbers, hence the relentless effort to shatter us into broken fragments. As their agendas are being exposed, the dividers will stop at nothing to cover their crimes against humanity. They have bunkers. All we have is each other. The good news is, that's all we need. Though we are intrinsically interconnected, our minds are being wired to obsess on our differences. Contrary to social indoctrination, we do not have to be ideologically aligned to stand together. We don't even have to like each other. There is only one thing that we must agree on, that freedom is our birthright. Now is the time to let go of whatever it is you're holding on to that keeps you divided from your friends, family, and fellow humans. Rise above all the micro dramas and distractions to see that a much bigger story is unfolding. Swallow your pride, humble yourself, let it go. I'm not suggesting that we look the other way when someone is clearly thwarting our forward momentum. There are people who deserve to be called out by name, especially those who are undermining our trust in each other. But even then, we should remember that there is a human life being affected by our words. We've been so conditioned to believe we are powerless that we've become careless with our power, like toddlers with loaded guns. How many times do we need to shoot our own foot till we realize that the power is in our hands? The only thing that can stop us at this point is us.
We've all been lied to, scammed, fooled, tricked, conned, and coerced. Yes, it sucks. But here we are, wiser and stronger than we were just 3 years ago. This is the moment for us to activate our innate ability to create solutions. That can only happen through the awareness of symbiosis, defined as a mutually beneficial relationship between different groups. All of life depends on relationships. Every living thing is in communication, from the stars to the planets, the earth, the plants, the elements, the insects, the animals, the humans, and every cell within us. Real change out there begins with real change inside. The question is, how bad does it have to get before we're willing to change?
Yeah.
But
Well,
this
there we
is
go. We did it. And I trust you'll edit that in there. I think your audience will love that, and you'll love it too. It
definitely put
it
that
kind of
in.
includes a lot of the stuff that we just spoke about. What a
Oh,
pleasure.
this has been wonderful. We
Thank
have to
you.
do this again.
Let's do
I
it
hope to
again.
meet you in person soon too again.
Yeah, me too. Me
Okay.
too. Take care
Thank
of
you.
yourself.
Okay, you too.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.